What's going on, my creative collective? Welcome to lesson number 11. Lesson number 11 for A Course in Creativity. I'm shifting in my seat here. Mirrors lining the gallery walls. This is lesson 11 from the course. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. This really speaks to our responsibility, and response is in response dash ability to different situations, and understanding that the things, this is moving more into a collective view, right? Like we were going through the things that we think and the things that we it's the personal, and now we're moving into more of a collective view. And I'll read to you from the course here. Section 1 says this: it seems as if the world determines what you perceive. It seems as if the world determines what you perceive. Today's idea introduces the concept that your thoughts determine the world you see. So today's idea introduces the concept that your thoughts determine the world you see. If the world is based on illusion, then we can choose, and based on illusion to the extent that we don't know what it actually is and what it's actually for. We are so disconnected from that because we see through our own eyes only all the time, which are fixed in time, which is fixed in experience, which is fixed in this moment. 10 days from now, things can be completely different, right? 5 days from now, things could be completely different because our place and our experience and our engagement in these different things has changed. So the illusion changes and shifts, and it moves all the time. So my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. I think this is a call to a very significant call. And this is based on Marianne Williamson did this. She did a rundown of A Course in Miracles and did all the workbook lessons last year, and I joined. It was something she offered through her website, and it was very enlightening. And in this particular lesson, she talked about how we move out of reaction. We move out of reaction, and this is a call to observe situations. I've had to work through this process as a trans person. Again, every time people get into a specific office, it's like target practice. Why? What's the point? What for? It doesn't make any sense. Like, make it make sense. And I think this is where we're starting to see that is a meaningless world. That's the meaningless world, and we're trying to make sense of it because we are looking at it through the lens of multidimensionality, and we're seeing how people legislate and flatten us, people, women, communities of color, people with disabilities, trans people, neurodivergent people, people with mental health challenges. Like how that flattens us. And that's the illusion, is it flattens us into specific ways that when it meets with that multidimensionality, we are pulled out of it because we have to respond to the way that we've been flattened. But I think that this particular lesson today, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. I think that we get into a place where we can really and truly buy into the ways that other people would flatten us. And we can get super duper caught up in trying to argue on behalf of our limitations in this way, on behalf of the illusions that other people have. And the thing that we forget is that in the present moment, that objective reality does not, it persists. It persists because it's true, right? There's a much bigger thing happening here in the present moment. And in the present moment, it's where we return to that awareness that people can legislate away all that they want, but they can't change the fact that it's still there. I can guarantee you that relative to the legislation, the draft alone will trigger things that will protect rights longer and in more profound ways that cannot just be overturned by a bunch of people who subjectively feel a specific way about a woman's right to choose. And I should also say a trans person's right to choose. I have a womb. It's important for this collective space to be held for those most impacted by these games of subjective truth versus, well, it's not even versus, subjective truth. It's trying to pass itself off as an objective reality. And I think it's important to be able to hold space for the liminality and the way that we don't really know how it might look in the end, and that can feel powerless. What this to me is about is less about reacting and just Yes, be in the feelings of it and process. If we go to places like outrage, we need that. We need to clear it so it doesn't get stuck. Because when it gets stuck, we see everything through that place and we flatten ourselves because we're not letting ourselves process emotions that are meant to flow. So this is not prescriptive in terms of saying, don't do this and don't react in this way and please react in this way. Not at all. I'm saying that there are truths that are at play. So when we say, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. That is a call to return to the present moment awareness. That there is, on the one hand, this thing happening, this subjective truth that is trying to articulate itself through policy and legislation. But that the objective reality, you can't snuff it out. You can't snuff it out. So what's actually happening here, right? And understanding that and seeing that and refusing to flatten yourselves and to buy into the illusion. Because a lot of these situations, what they do, and again, I speak from experience as a trans person who has watched this happen, political cycles, it's just like, trans folks' worlds get a lot smaller around, election seasons when particularly transphobic politicians are trying to stir up their base, and they use trans folks as target practice, our rights and freedoms and all of that, just to stir up some kind of base that they have, that's the only way that they can do it. So this is me speaking from that place and seeing the game. It's just a freaking game. It's a ridiculous one nonetheless, but it's seeing it for what it is and understanding that you remain so much more than that one thread would have you believe. And I think that this lesson in particular is a call to stay in that place, because I think this is where we start to get into hope. This is where we start to get into forgiveness. And forgiveness seems like a bit of a stretch when we start to think about things happening in the States right now. But what I'm talking about here is forgiveness when we apply this to less charged situations and less politicized situations, right? This is where we start to access forgiveness because we see the different takes that we can have on situations. We see the different takes that we can have. And that allows us to clear our energy, because that energy can then be put towards something else, forward momentum in another way. I'm talking about how much of our mind gets caught up in believing these things to be true. And again, you cannot stand in the energy of the problem and find a solution. You cannot do it, right? You will scream yourself hoarse. You'll scream yourself hoarse. I've experienced this again as a trans person. You will scream yourself hoarse. For me, it came in the form of bringing on autoimmune symptoms, because I was burning not just the candle at both ends. I was like burning it in the middle and then on the sides, right? Like, and even now there are different things that I encounter that I'm just like, how is that not an obvious thing for trans people to be included, right? So you will scream yourself hoarse when you keep arguing on behalf of your ego. The thing to do is to pull back, at least in the way I've experienced it. But this is where we start to understand that my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. The good news about this, though, is that we get to make the meaning. We get to make the meaning. We get to make the meaning. We get to do what it is that we need to do to keep that multidimensionality alive. But my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. This one was a tough one because of things that have happened, and there was so much that I wanted to address, and there's probably some stuff that I didn't even get the chance to address, but I hope at its most basic level the information is in there in a way that makes it tangible, and hopefully could continue a conversation that some people might have, may give people ideas. Again, if folks come for me in the comments, that's okay. I've made peace with that. I'm not here to flatten folks or fight them. This meaningless world, we really do have to choose, because our energy and time is finite here. Our energy and time is finite. And we have to choose not that we respond. I think it's important to respond to situations like this. And again, I say it's almost like people might think like, whoa, this is like associated with the same lesson. No, it's just an example. And because it's such a strongly activated one for people, I felt it important to talk about like this. So I'm not going to look at world events and be like, no, we're spiritually bypassing. What? We're gonna dive away from that. No. No, that's not what this is for. It seems as if the world determines what you perceive. It seems as if the world determines what you perceive. This is the reaction that we have. Today's idea introduces the concept that your thoughts determine the world you see. I go back to the example of the person in the bathroom confronting me at the door, asking me if I knew that I was in the wrong bathroom. And it's in that moment, I think to myself, as if I was speaking to that person, I would say, you do not get to choose. You do not get to push me to make a decision about your humanity. I choose to see spirit in you. I choose to see spirit in this moment, and that is the thing that is not illusion. That is the objective reality. Everything else is subjective. I choose to find that peace. I choose to be in that place of peace because I know that me getting dysregulated, it's not about somebody winning. It's not about that. It's about the fact that then I can't show up for myself either. I think one of the cruel tricks of the world as we know it today, and it's like, I think a trick of the light, but it's this way that, there are so many subjective truths that people will fight for and use different policy levers and politics to fight for. But the reality is that the world that exists outside of objective reality is genuinely meaningless. And I think that's a lot for people to wrap their heads around, because the fights that people have built a whole life around, a whole career around, disappear. And that's their whole identity. That's their whole ego gone. Just evaporates in a moment. So lesson 11, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. How are we going to respond in the present moment to situations and seeing the things in the world that we do? How are we going to respond from the present moment? Feel what we need to feel. Yes, process those emotions. Absolutely. Grieve. Be outraged. Be in the feelings of them. But don't take the feelings and assume them as an identity, because that's where we begin to forget that we are so powerful. We are powerful. We do have power to change things. And that's where we remember that. So I wanted to make sure that I touched on the nuances, because this is a nuanced conversation, and I did not want to just put this out there without any regard for what's actually happening in the world. So I feel like that's the worst of spiritual bypassing. That's bypassing at its finest. And ultimately, if you're in any kind of spiritual practice, the point of it isn't to turn away from when things get tricky and away from when things get hard. It's to look at the hard in the face and to feel it all and to move through it all, and to be in it all. Because that to me is defying the illusion, right? And just remembering that in the present moment, everything is happening right now. So if everything is happening right now, how can we respond, right? So that's the ultimate question, right? Remembering that we're powerful, and the present moment is the way that we can access that. But go out into the world and remember who you are. Don't let things happening, don't let the meaninglessness of the world try to convince you otherwise and make you forget who you are. No. So I just wanted to say that as well. So thank you so much for your eyes and your time, wherever this finds you on the time-space continuum, my friends, morning, afternoon, or night. I hope that it finds you well. Take care.